Hey, this is Jerry from Bliz Studio, and in this two-part series of the base game tutorial overall series, I'm going to show you how to use this base game for a stacker type game. So I'm going to show you some of the basic stacker fundamentals that are going to let you get started. And there's a lot of different of those types of games that you can use this for. So if you're ready to get started, let's go. Okay, so here I am in Unity, and we can take this game in all kinds of different directions. So in this demo, I want to make this into a stacker game. So we've got this character that is running down this road, and I want them to be able to collect something that they can have stacked. You can have it be in all kinds of different ways. Here are a few examples of what you can find on the App Store. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to have this runner collect donuts, okay? So let's go ahead and just make a quick donut. I'm going to go ahead and use a ProBuilder torus. So I'm going to have this torus, looks like a big donut shape, right? So let's go ahead and make this into a donut. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this a donut. And of course it's way too big. So let's go ahead and take this down in size. I don't want it to be actual donut size compared to the character. I want it to be a lot bigger so that they're kind of carrying it in their arms. So let's make this maybe 0.3. Yeah, and I think that's about the size I want to make it. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and make a material for this as well. So let's go ahead and create material, and I'll call this donut. And let's go ahead and choose a color for this. So I'm going to choose a donut color, which, you know, what kind of color is donut? Maybe something like kind of a tannish looking color, maybe. So let's add that to our donut. So that changes the color. And I want to go ahead and make some icing color on the top, some pink icing. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this and have this be a second color, and we'll just call this donut icing. Yeah, that works. And I want to make this pink. So let's go ahead and make it nice and pinky. Something like that. I want to change this from metallic to specular. And yeah, that looks good. Okay, so I've got a material already applied to this game object. So how do I go ahead and apply a second material? Well, it's fairly easy. So all I need to do is within ProBuilder, I can select a certain face. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just select all the top faces here. Yeah, I think that looks good. So all I need to do is just go ahead and apply my donut icing to that particular group of faces. And now you can see that I have a donut. Nice, perfect. So the ultimate goal is that I want to have this donut be stacked up in the person carrying them. So every time we see a donut on the road, we move our character to collect that donut, and then it's going to add to the stack. So what we're going to do, let's get this set up. I'm going to go ahead and select the total shape. Let's get this in place so the character is kind of carrying it. And we want to put the first donut in place, and I know it's kind of clipping through the arms just a little bit, but that's okay because we're really not going to pay that much attention to it. But I think that works pretty good. And then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and just make a big stack of these. So let's do this. Inside the player, I'm going to go ahead and add a new empty game object that we're going to use as a folder, and I'll call this donuts. Let's go ahead and add that donut in there. And then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I'm going to call this donut 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate these so that there is a stack of them. Cool, so all right, there we go. We now have a lot of donuts. So I want to also go ahead and animate these donuts so that they're kind of bouncing with the character, okay? So as the character is running, these donuts are kind of bouncing too. So let's just play this real quick to see how our character interacts and how it runs. And then we'll kind of do something similar with the donuts and just kind of offset them slightly. you can see how my character bounces up and down slightly. So let's go into our character animation and look at the animation, and we can kind of see exactly when those kind of bounces happen and what the timing is of that. So let's go, oh, that's the wrong animation, run flip. Let's go jogging here. So it's at 24 frames a second. So there's a up at frame 4 and then a down at frame 8. So we're looking at an 8 frame sequence here. So every 8 frames, we've got an up and a down. Okay, so we're gonna do something similar with the donuts. So let's go into our donuts. We wanna go ahead and create an animation. So I've selected my donut container, and then inside of that's all the donuts. So I'm gonna animate all of these together. So I need to go ahead and go into my animations folder, and we'll just call this donuts. Boom, there we go. So now we have the animation. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the timing to be the same as my character animation, which is 24 frames a second. Okay, so we have that set up. And now what is it I wanna do? Well, I wanna animate these so that they kind of like bounce up and down. But I want them to be slightly off from the character. So when the character is moving up, so right after the character starts to move up, then they kind of start to move up, okay? So we're gonna do this in a 8 frame sequence here, and I can easily go ahead and hit record. Okay, so on frame 4, the character is at its apex, so it's top. And then on frame 8, it's at its lowest. Okay, so let's go ahead and just duplicate that for right now. So what I'm gonna do is on frame 4, we want the donuts to be moved up a little bit. So I'm gonna have my donut stack selected, and I'm gonna move those up a little bit. And then on frame 8, I'm gonna have them move back down a little bit. Okay, and so what I think I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and then also each of the donuts themselves within this sequence, I'm gonna have those animate just slightly different. So maybe the very top ones are exaggerated even further. So let me go ahead and just add some of those animation keyframes in there real quick, and then we'll get back to the total animation. Okay, so that's a start. It kind of looks like a big spring. So what I want to do is just kind of offset these slightly. Okay, so let's give this a test. I'm not sure this is exactly what I'm looking for, but you know, it gives us a place to start. Yeah, it's not bad. I know it's not exactly what I want, but it definitely, I think, works for the moment. Okay, so now we have the donuts animated. We need to go ahead and start setting up a game object that is going to be the collectible, which is a donut, and then also a enemy game object, which is going to take a donut away from us. So let me go ahead and I've got the donuts. I can go ahead and use one of those as my collectible. So let's set that up. So I'm gonna go ahead and just duplicate these. One of these I'm gonna take out of my player because it's not part of the main animation set. And I wanna have just this kind of in my scene that my character can then collect. Okay, so we'll just call this our donut collectible. And then we also want to tag this. So we want to tag this with collectible. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new tag. And we'll create a new tag here, and we'll call this collectible. And then we need to go back to that game object. So we've created the tag. Now we need to go ahead and tag it with that. So now we have this set as collectible, convex, and is trigger. So it has to be a trigger so that we can then collect it or do something with it. So I have that collectible in the scene. And let's go ahead and I'm gonna just move this next to the character because I'm not gonna worry about dealing with having these move or creating the level and then having these move just yet. Just want to create the very basic functionality first. Okay, so we have this set as a collectible. Okay, so what would be a good enemy if what we want to collect is donuts? So how about a piece of fruit? So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and create a new game object. I'm going to make this a ProBuilder game object. And let's go ahead and just choose a sphere. And that works. I'm just going to go ahead and move this to the left side of the character. Let's go ahead and just make this smaller as well. So let's go maybe 0.4, 0.4, 0.4. Okay. And then I want to make this into maybe kind of an apple type shape. So let me go ahead and just pretty this up real quick. I'm going to go ahead and create a new material. And we'll go ahead and leave it as a metallic material. We'll go ahead and just call this apple. And then we just need to choose a color for it. So apples are kind of red, right? And let's go ahead and drop that apple material onto our game object. And that's definitely not the right color of red. Let's go ahead and go with something a little deeper. And then I also need to kind of maybe shape it a little bit. So let's go ahead and just do that real quick. Okay, so that's kind of apple shape. So let's go ahead and just maybe create a little leaf on it just to give it the full look of an apple. Cool. And so I think that kind of looks like an apple. All right, so let's go ahead and we need to tag this apple as an enemy. So let's go ahead and create a tag of enemy. So I'm going to go into tags, add tag. We need to create a tag of enemy. And then we need to go back to our apple and we need to tag that as an enemy. Okay, so now we have both a good object and a bad object. And I want to go ahead and create prefabs of these. So what we want to do is I'm going to take my donut collectible and then I need to create a prefabs folder. So these are game objects that we can then pull out and use over and over again. So let's go ahead and create a new folder. I'm going to call this prefabs. And then I'm going to drag both my apple. And now you can see that turns blue. That means it's a prefab. And then also my donut collectible. And then if I need to make a change to any of these, then I can always just go in the prefab and it's going to affect all of my apples or all of my donuts. Now that we have that, I need to go ahead and start setting up my game manager to recognize if we have touched those. Okay, so I'm going to go into my game manager. So currently I have player movement set up as an FSM and I need to go ahead and set up another FSM. So I'm going to go and create a new FSM and we'll call this collectibles. Okay, so I'm going to go collectibles as my starting state. I'm going to go ahead and also name my Playmaker FSM as this as well. So collectibles. All right, so now that I have that set up, I want to detect if I've hit a trigger of one or the other. Okay, so let's just make sure our apple has a trigger set up as well. So we're going to go choose convex and is trigger on our mesh collider. And then now we can go back to our player and detect if we've hit one of those. Okay, so we need to do a trigger event. So trigger event. So I want to do a trigger event of not the owner, but of a specific game object, and that's going to be our player. Okay, so on our player, we want to do on trigger enter if we collide with a certain tag. So in this case, either the collectible or the enemy. So we'll start out with collectible. So we're going to go ahead and do the collectible. If we do, we want to send an event. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new event and we'll call this collect donuts. If I can spell. There we go. Okay, and so this is saying that our character needs both a rigid body and a collider. So I didn't set that up yet. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So in my player, so this is my player here, I want to go ahead and set up a collider that's going to then be able to detect if it hits another collider. So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to add a collider. And there's a bunch of different types of colliders we can use. Because my character isn't jumping, I'm just going to move it left and right. I'm going to go ahead and just add a box collider. And this is not we don't need a box collider 2D, we need a box collider. And then I'm just going to go ahead and edit the scale of this here real quick. And that works pretty good. Okay, so let's go ahead, and we don't need to set is trigger because the donut and the apple have is trigger. Those are the events that I want to touch, okay? All right, so we have that set up. We also need a rigid body, so let's go ahead and add a rigid body. So we want to go ahead and add a rigid body. Now, because I'm not jumping with this character, I don't need to use gravity. So let's go ahead and uncheck use gravity. And that should get us pretty good. So let's go back to our player collectibles. So we have set up a trigger. So if our player hits a collectible tag, we want to send an event of collect donuts. So let's go ahead and add that transition. So we're going to add transition, collect donuts. Let's go off to a new state, and we'll just call this collect donuts. And then I also need to do the same thing with the trigger if we hit the apple. So let's go and just copy this and paste it. And then the player, if they enter a tag of enemy. We don't want to go to collect donuts. We want to send a new event of subtract donuts. So let's go ahead and add that transition. So let's go subtract donuts, and we're going to go off to a different state. So let's do this, subtract donuts. Okay, so now I have two states. So if I hit the donut, it's going to go to collect donuts. If I enter a trigger of enemy, it's going to go to subtract donuts. Okay, so let's go ahead and just test this real quick to see if this works. So I hit play. So if I move my character over here, it should go to collect donuts. And it does. And of course, it's not going to go back. So let's unplay, and then let's go ahead and play again. And let's detect to see if we hit our apple. And there we go. So that works. Okay, so now that I have that set up and working, I want to have a variable that is the number of donuts. So we want to keep track of that. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable, and this is going to be an integer, so a whole number. I'm going to go ahead and have this just be called donuts. So now that I have that, it's going to start out at a number of 0, and then I want to either, if they hit collect donuts, I want to add to that, and if they hit subtract donuts, I want to subtract from that number. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and just set a loop on these real quick, but I'm going to go ahead and I will undo that later. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a finish transition, and we'll go back to our collectibles. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do a finish transition and go back to collectibles as well, so that we're going back to the detection. I'm going to undo this because we'll have other things to do later, but this is going to help us to kind of detect what's happening. So let's go ahead, and what I want to do is when I collect a donut, I want to add to that number. And then when I clicked on subtract, I want to subtract from that number. So let's do this. We want to do an integer add. So an int add. So in my collect donuts, I want to add to that variable. So the variable that I want to collect, or the variable that I want to add to, is donuts. And I want to add 1. Now I don't want to do this every frame. I just want to do this once. I just want to add 1 donut when I hit collect donuts. Now I want to do the same thing with subtract. So let's do an int subtract, and there's not an int subtract. So what can we do? So let's go ahead and just go back to int add. So again, we want to add to donuts. Instead of adding a +1, we're going to add a -1, which is effectively subtracting 1 from our total. So we'll go a -1. And again, we don't want to do this every frame. And then now we can kind of have that nice little loop. So let's go ahead and just do this real quick and test it. So I'm going to hit play. I'm going to go into my variables so we can see this number right here. So currently our number is 0. So if I hit the collect donuts, let's go over here. You can see that I've added 1. If I go to my apple, I've now subtracted 1. So you can see if I hit the donut, hit the donut, hit the donut, that number continually goes up. And if I hit the apple, hit the apple, hit the apple, you can see that number continually goes down. Okay. So that part works. The next thing we need to do is to detect if we have 0, we don't want to continually subtract donuts. If we have more than 10, we don't want to continually add. So what we need to do at each of these steps is to do an int compare. So on collect donuts, let's do an int compare. So int compare, so I'm going to compare the donuts. Now let's go ahead and just move this to the top. And I want to check on the donuts number. Okay, so this is where that number we're storing. So if it's equal to 10, then I just want to do my finished transition. I don't want to do anything else. So I'm going to go directly to finished. And then if it is less than, then I'm going to go to a new state to then compare and then do something with the donuts. But we'll go ahead and just leave this as it is for the moment. Same thing with the subtract. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to do an int compare. So if our donut number is equal to 0, we want to go ahead and do a finished. And if it's less than, we also want to do finished. Okay, so it's going to skip this int add -1. So here we're going to add, we're going to do a compare, then we're going to add. If it's equal to 10, then we don't want to do an add. Here, if it's less than, equal or less than 0, we don't want to subtract. So let's give that a test. So let's go over to our int over here just to check. So we're going to 7, 8, 9, and 10. So we're going to do our compare again. And now you can see it's not allowing me to add another donut. Then we'll do the same thing on the other side, continually subtract. So I'm at 0. Now if I hit this again, you can see it's not allowing me to subtract less than 0. Okay, cool. So that part all works. That's awesome. Hey, I know this is a long video and I covered a lot of information, but this is going to give you the basics for creating a stacker game. So stay tuned for the next part when we're actually going to create the rest of the mechanics for this type of game. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and that little bell icon down there so you know when the next tutorial is available. Until next time.